And a good evening, everybody. Chris McDonald with you on this Thursday night, the 25th day of July, 2024. Sorry about that. We had the volume off, and I was just staring and looking at that volume thing there. I said, well, they got the last part of the intro at least. Listen, we got a very special program tonight, and this is a pre-recorded interview that we're about to play for you with Mr. Bill Federer. And we interviewed him back late June. Maybe 1st of July, and with everything going on with the country, we've just weeks got by us. We were going to play it, and everything happened with President Trump, and then Joe Biden dropped out, the debate, RNC, everything, and it just got away from us. But tonight, felt really strongly yesterday to play this interview tonight. Alice Linehan, we got a very powerful interview with her coming up next week. Andy Griffin, talked to Andy Griffin last night, or this afternoon, I should say. He's going to be with me a week from tonight, 9 o'clock Eastern. Please be with us. Pro-life man's got a lot to say, and they're making abortion an issue. And it's going to be great. It was good talking to my buddy tonight. And we're going to have him on. Now, what we're going to do tonight is this. We've been on late pretty much every night for the last week. After the interview, I'm going to come back and say goodnight to you. We're not going to have a late show tonight. Tomorrow night, we'll do a news wrap-up. There's a lot of headlines today, a lot of things we could talk about tonight, but we're going to give you a break. And then tomorrow night, we'll probably have a late news wrap-up, play some video, laugh with you a little bit, look at some comical memes, and talk Trump with you and some other things. I do want to make a few general comments before I play this interview tonight, folks. There is a belief that Trump staged this assassination attempt a week and a half ago. And there's a growing trend also that somehow or another people have gotten this idea that Trump's the Antichrist. I was looking at a feed today. I wasn't even looking for it. Just happened to come across it, and trying to quote Babylon, the verse in Revelation 18 about coming out of Babylon and all that, and had Trump listed as the Antichrist. It's amazing to me. It's just absolutely insane, amazing that I don't see any memes out there from the Christian community with Kamala Harris and her radical baby killing agenda. I don't. There's a lot of Christians that are silent on abortion. They're silent on the issues that really matter, but they feel like that this makes them spiritual to trash Trump and to make him out to be the evil ogre that they tend to want to believe he is. I can't tell you what to believe tonight. Don't want to try. I will give you some sound advice if you'll take it. Don't listen to that nonsense. Don't listen to that nonsense. Folks, if there's ever been a time that we need to be soberly minded, sober, and not carried away into this hysteria and the stuff that people are pushing just to get attention, and that's all they are. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it tonight. It's Thursday night. We call them attention harlots, and I got another word for it, but this is a family show. That's all they are. They're attention harlots. They want attention. They put stuff out there to get you to click on it, to get you to like it, to get you to share it. It's an insult. It is an insult. It is an insult to the intelligence of the American public to believe such nonsense about President Trump. It is an insult to the family of the dead fireman that got killed protecting his family from the bullets. Regardless of what the Secret Service did or didn't do, it's an insult to the rank and file that did try to protect him. Granted, how little they got right about this. Still, the law enforcement. It's an insult to the hundreds of thousands that were there that Saturday in Butler, Pennsylvania, that was there to support President Trump. And this is the thing that I see happening. They're not just attacking Trump, but they're attacking his supporters. And it's not coming, this is mind-blowing to me. It's not coming from left-wing sources. This is coming from people that claim that they're Christian. And it's comical. It's just comical. So I don't know what to tell you tonight. This interview with Bill Federer is going to speak a little bit to what's going on, because we're going to deal with silence equals consent. And if we sit at home in November, we are basically giving consent to baby killing, to perversion, to open borders, to some of the worst evil that is about to be perpetrated against this country in 50 years. This radical, dangerously radical left-wing candidate that the Dems are dangling before the country tonight. And do not underestimate this evil that is behind this party. Do not underestimate it. But what makes it so maddening is that that's not what Christians are concerned about tonight. No, they're concerned about whether Trump staged an assassination to get attention or get votes. And somehow or another that he's Antichrist or not. We've had people disconnect from the network over this, and that's more than fine. I'm going to tell you what. You can do what you want to do. Chris McDonald's going in them polls come November. And we're going to vote. And we're going to vote for President Trump. Very excitingly. We're going to support President Trump. We're going to do everything we can to get President Trump elected. Not going to blink an eye doing it. And just because I want to support President Trump in that election don't mean that Trump's my Messiah or Trump's my Savior. I'm not electing a pastor-in-chief. I'm electing the president, the commander-in-chief. Because I recognize the evil that is being perpetrated on the left. And people out there will say, well, isn't Trump not perfect? Trump's not perfect, folks. Nobody says he was. I don't think I've heard a soul say he was. But when you have a choice, a clear-cut choice, it's pretty stupid to do the things that these people are doing. And they're trying to get people not to vote. Please don't buy into that. Please don't buy into that. That's all I can ask you to do tonight. I want you to listen to this interview. Bill Federer is going to sort of lay the hammer to the wood about the silence of consent. And silence equals consent. You know, Dietrich Bonhoeffer once said that those that stand silent in the face of evil are just as complicit in the evil. And I believe that tonight wholeheartedly. And we're going to stand before God and give an account for it if we are. Because this election coming up is truly going to be the most important probably in the history of this nation. And this is the thing, folks. If this election goes bad, people are going to probably perish on this earth because of it, because wars will be started. This onslaught of illegality in our country, this lawlessness is going to produce murder, rape, violence, theft, assault like we've never seen. It is pretty likely, not just possible, but very likely that faith will be attacked. Christians will be under the gun. Our faith will come under great, great persecution. And this idea that we can say, well, God will protect us. Let me tell you something. How can God sit and protect his own people when his own people will not even get up off of their blessed assurance and vote for a candidate that would protect faith? You go figure that one out. What I'm trying to tell you is silence equals consent. And apathy equals consent. And it might do us well to learn a lesson from history. The German church sat around apathetic and silent when Adolf Hitler came to power and killed 6 million Jews in doing it. I want you to listen to Bill Federer tonight. I'll be back to say goodbye to you, and then we're going to have a great show tomorrow night. Enjoy the interview with Mr. Bill Federer, AmericanMinute.com. Here's Bill. And a good evening, everybody. Chris McDonald with you on a very special pre-recorded McFiles special tonight. We are always grateful to have this gentleman. I've grown to know him over the last few years. He's a good guy, and he's a dear friend. William Federer, AmericanMinute.com. He had sympathy on me. He put his website up for me so I wouldn't get it wrong without trying to guess it. That's all right. If I messed this up today, there'd be no hope for Chris. I always get the .com and the .org mixed up. Bill, it's good to see you today. I got a lot to talk about. You got a brand new book. We're very proud to sort of push today, The Silence or the Sin of Consent, The Silence of Consent, and I'm grateful to get you to talk about it. But welcome back to the McFiles, friend. I know you've been busy. We're just grateful when you can spend time with the Silence Equals Consent. I knew I was going to mess something up here. The Sin of Omission. It's a great book, and we're going to let you talk about this today. How are you, sir?
Good, good. Great to be with you.
The book came out just a few months ago. I actually heard you when we were together. In fact, it seems like it was last fall or sometime when you were in Nashville at one of the events, and you were talking about this, and you've put this into book form about the sin of omission and the silence. And I love what you got down here to the bottom. Speak now or forever lose your freedom. I want to share this with the people, something you told me in the car that day about why the Christian voice is so important in America as it relates to the government. You said that, it's our hope is in Jesus. We're both believers, and we believe in the Lord Jesus Christ today. But the reason that we must stay involved in government is that if we don't, we're not going to have the freedom to worship Jesus as we like. And that's really what the country's facing right now with this state of affairs that we've got going on in America. But this book has a lot to say about the sin of silence, and it is the sin of omission. Tell us a little bit about the book and your thoughts on all this.
Yeah, so I did a 2-hour special with George Barnum on the Christian Television Network, and some of the facts he brought out in his polling data is that the areas with the highest percentage of Christians have the lowest voter turnout. The area with the highest percentage of Christians have the lowest voter turnout. And so the idea is, where in the world did spiritual people get the idea that it's better to let the unspiritual rule? How can you convince godly people to let ungodliness reign? I mean, where did this idea come from? And so I trace it in the book to the two waves of pastors and churches that founded America. The 1600s, Calvinist Puritans, and their key word is participation. And then the 1700s, the Pietists, and their key word is withdrawal. But before I get into that, I address in the book nationalism. So we hear the term Christian nationalism bantered about even President Biden saying the greatest threat to America is Christian nationalists. And so the idea is, where did the idea come from? So nationalism is the opposite of globalism. There are people called globalists that want a one world government, which of course they will control. And one of those is Brock Chisholm. And he was the first director of the World Health Organization. Many people may have heard of the World Health
Yes.
Organization, right? And so Brock Chisholm said, to achieve world government, it is necessary to remove from the minds of men their national patriotism. So they specifically have targeted people that want to preserve their nations to get rid of them. They want to remove from the minds of men anybody that believes in national patriotism. Why? Because they want a one world government. So how are they going to put in place this one world government? Just going to ask people, hey, give us control of your life. It usually doesn't happen that way. So they want to create a crisis. So it's called the Great Reset. It's an orchestrated global crisis by all these globalists, the Klaus Schwab World Economic Forum, the George Soros, the Larry Fink, BlackRock, all these different people who tend to lean toward a globalist government. And their idea, matter of fact, Klaus Schwab wrote in his Agenda 2030 video, you'll own nothing and be happy. And so it's like, oh, what do you mean own nothing? It sounds a lot like Karl Marx,
Karl Marx, it does.
who said the theory of communism may be summed up in a single sentence: abolition of private property. Abolition of private property means you'll own nothing. And so they want to create this orchestrated crisis, financial crisis, get people to stop using the dollar by inflating it, and getting the Saudis to sell oil and something other than the petrodollar, and then health crises and war crises and food shortage crises. They want this agenda of a crisis because then people will panic and surrender their freedoms and their national freedoms to a globalist group that promises to fix it. Second, nationalism depends on the nation. So in socialist nations like the USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, communists like CCP in China, and the word Nazi stands for National Socialist Workers' Party. And Islamic countries, there's no individual rights. And so nationalism is bad over there because there's no individual rights. Well, guess what? In our American Republic, we have individual rights from a creator. And these include the freedom of conscience, the freedom of religion, the freedom of speech, the freedom of press, the freedom of assembly, the freedom to defend yourself, the freedom to have a impartial trial by a jury of your peers, freedom from cruel and unusual punishment. So these are good things. And to top it all off, it's government from the consent of the governed. You get to be in charge. So we have rights that the government cannot take away because they come from a creator, and we're in charge. So nationalism over here helps to preserve individual rights, where over in other socialist, communist, Islamic countries, there are no individual rights. Lincoln highlighted this in his Gettysburg Address. Our fathers brought forth a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from the earth. So you get to be in charge. So nationalism in other countries bad. Over here, it preserves a country where the people are in charge of their own lives. That's sort of a good thing. Finally, Christian nationalism used to be called Christian patriotism, and every leader encouraged it. I have an 1828 Noah Webster's dictionary. The word nationalism is not in there. The word patriotism is love of one's country. And so George Washington at Valley Forge, 1778, said, to the distinguished character of patriot, it should be our highest glory to laud the more distinguished character of Christian. Lincoln's inaugural address, intelligence, patriotism, Christianity, and a firm reliance on him are still competent to adjust in the best way all our present difficulty. And so he mentions patriotism and Christianity right next to each other. And so he is a Republican, frees the slaves.
Mhm.
Ulysses S. Grant is a Republican. He starts the Department of Justice and pushes through the Ku Klux Klan Act to stop the Democrats in the South from disarming blacks and pushing through black codes and Jim Crow laws and starting the KKK. And even Senator Robert Byrd, the longest serving Democrat senator, had been a member of the KKK.
Okay, that's right.
And so you had Republicans that wanted to defend blacks. And so Teddy Roosevelt was a Republican. He had the first black man as a guest for dinner in the White House, Booker T. Washington. And Teddy Roosevelt said, the mob lynches a Negro. Every Christian patriot in America needs to lift up his voice in loud and eternal protest against the mob spirit. So there were some churches that didn't want to speak out against lynchings. Oh, we don't want to bring politics into the church. Yeah, they lynched somebody, but we don't want to talk about that. And Teddy Roosevelt said, no, every Christian patriot needs to have a loud and eternal protest against this. And then FDR, he passed out Gideon's New Testaments and Book of Psalms to all the soldiers in World War II. And he wrote the foreword. As commander-in-chief, I take pleasure in commending the reading of the Bible to all who serve in the armed forces of the United States. Here he is defending our nation against Imperial Japan and the Nazis, and he's passing out Bibles.
Mhm.
And he said in November 1st, 1940, those forces hate democracy and Christianity as two phases of the same civilization. They oppose democracy because it is Christian. They oppose Christianity because it preaches democracy. And then Roosevelt said, May 27th, 1941, the whole world is divided between pagan brutality and the Christian ideal. We choose human freedom, which is the Christian ideal. You wonder if mainstream media would call Franklin Roosevelt a Christian nationalist. Here he is defending our nation, and he's a Christian, right? He's Episcopalian, but he's passing out New Testaments. Eisenhower, 1954, said any group that awakens all of us is a dedicated, patriotic group that can well take the Bible in one hand, the flag in the other, and march ahead. So everybody's encouraging patriotism and the Bible and Christianity. And it wasn't that long ago. In 1965, 93% of Americans identify themselves as Christian.
Unreal.
93%, 69% Protestant, 24% Catholic, and then 3% of the country was Jewish. So you had to defend the country. You were predominantly Christian and wanting to preserve the nation of freedom. And so the left engages in something called psychological projection. They blame us for what they're doing. Right? It's in the Bible. Potiphar's wife accused Joseph of lusting after her when she was lusting after him. And so they are the ones that want to set up a woke nationalism. They're wanting to prefer a Satanist theocracy, a transgender dominionism, right? They want to force their views and they're intolerant of you, right? And so it's not so much that the debate is over legislating morality. The debate is we want the government to stop legislating immorality. Mm-hmm. And that the Christians aren't so much interested in forcing their views on people. They just don't want the government to force their views on them and on their children. So Christians want freedomism, not dominionism. Give us freedom. Anyway, why does the mainstream media always call pro-life people anti-abortion?
Great point.
I mean, there's no pro-life group that puts on their sign anti-abortion. No, they put pro-life.
Pro-life.
Every single news article will call them anti-abortion. Why? Negative word association. Why do they call Christian patriots Christian nationalists? Negative word association. And then it's interesting. Here's an article. Follow the money to the after party. Rockefeller's bankrolling of after-party Bible studies is a red flag. The same grant round is a group seeking to promote leadership of rural LGBTQ people. So here you have Rockefeller, Soros, all these globalists, and they're giving money to LGBTQ activists, and they're giving money to woke seminaries to teach Christians not to get involved. What a brilliant strategy. Get your opponents uninvolved and get your supporters involved. And so that's the first couple chapters of my book. And again, it's called Silence Equals Consent, the Sin of Omission. And but the meat of the book is I get into the history of number one, our government in America, and then number two, where did this idea come from for the godly people to let ungodliness reign? And if you want, Chris, I can get into that.
Sure, go ahead. I want you to keep going because these are very powerful things. I do want to ask you a question about the word association with the left. It seems also I would sort of by extension, they've almost painted socialism and communism bill as a positive thing. They believe the government is God, and they believe that taking our property and taking our rights and these things are necessary because in their mind, people, I've heard the Dems say this, that the people, if we leave it up to the people to choose, they're going to choose not us, but they'll choose somebody like Donald Trump, or they'll choose a candidate that the left don't like. And this seeps into every facet of faith. And again, Christianity is criminalized, marginalized, denigrated. True faith has done all those things. And the LGBTQ, the transdominionism, the Satan theocracy, and all of this is elevated. It's almost like calling good evil and evil good. And is that sort of part of what this agenda is too? Because it seems like these word associations, everything that is good in this country is labeled evil. Everything that's evil in this country is labeled good.
Yeah, their definition of democracy is dictatorship.
That's correct.
I mean, they want to preserve a democracy where they can imprison their political opponents. They can cancel and censor anybody that posts any views they don't agree with. It's like, okay, their definition of democracy is pretty much the definition of a dictatorship. And so the two waves of pastors and churches that founded America was the 1600s, the Puritans, and they got nicknamed Old Lights, but their key word is participation. And the 1700s Pietists, they're called New Lights, and their key word is withdrawal. So participation and withdrawal. So we want to unpack this. So the default setting for human government is gangs. If we were to get rid of all the police, you'd have gangs. And a gang leader with enough weapon, we call a king. And the first recorded gang leader king was Nimrod. And he wanted to build this tower so high, according to Josephus, that if God destroyed the world again with a flood, he could survive on top. And he made everybody bake bricks and bring them, or he would kill them. He wanted people to fear him rather than fear God. So this is the beginning of governments wanting people to fear the government more than fear God. And you see throughout history, these things come in, head to head many, many times, and people have to make a choice. Do I fear government? Do I fear God? Like Peter standing up in front of the Sanhedrin, right? It's better to obey God rather than man. But this is the beginning, Nimrod, and his tower was, in a sense, the first attempt at a one world government, right? I mean, this is where the population of the world is, according to archaeologists and anthropologists and etymologists that study the spread of languages. And so you have Noah's Ark lands on Mount Ararat, and then down this valley is the Tigris Euphrates rivers, and between it's really fertile, so they call it the Fertile Crescent. And that's where the civilization was centered. And Nimrod wanted to control it. And so he was basically the first one wanting to be a one world government guy. And God comes down and confuses the languages, and the people scatter into language groups that turn into nations. Lo and behold, nations were God's invention to postpone a one world government.
Very good point.
Take the population of the world, scatter it into subgroups, and they'll compete with each other. But guess what? Every generation you have some king wanting to conquer other nations. And if left unchecked, they'd have been happy to conquer them all. Right, the Nimrods and the Pharaohs and the kings of China and the kings of Assyria and kings of Babylon, kings of Persia, Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, Ashkenaz, Attila the Hun, the Muslims, the Charlemagne, the Vikings, Genghis Khan. You just keep going on and on. And kingdoms keep getting bigger because with military advancements, kings can kill more people, and with technological advancements, kings can track more people. But anybody that can plot on a graph sees that at some point it's going to max out on a global level. And people are going to have to make their decision. Are we going to fear God or are we going to fear the government? Now we're going to be told that we have to fear this globalist government. There's a great reset. There's a panic. We got to surrender. And so at the time of the Reformation, you have a king that's named Charles V of Spain, and he's the most powerful king on the planet. And but wherever there's a king, you have to believe the way the king does.
Right.
Nebuchadnezzar, when I tell you to bow to my statue and blow the trumpets, you better bow. And so this is the norm. It's considered treason if you don't believe the way your king does. And so we have a big change in the Reformation in 1517, and with the invention of the printing press. And now you have large percentages of people not believing the way their king does. And what the king, whose realm, his religion, right? And so in 1572, the Iron Duke of Alba is sent by the King of Spain to Antwerp, Holland. And he commits the Spanish Fury. He kills 10,000 Dutch Reformed. And same year, 1572, the Queen of France, Catherine de' Medici, kills 30,000 Huguenots in Paris, called the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. And so you have people that are scholars struggling with what to do with Romans 13. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. It's like, okay, yeah, but what if the authority that exists wants to kill your wife and kids? I caught them praying and they weren't saying the right prayers.
Come on.
And so you had people protesting, and they were nicknamed Protestants. And one was John Calvin.
Yeah.
And he writes, "We are subject to the men who rule over us, but subject only in the Lord. If they command anything against him, let us not pay the least regard to it." In other words, you obey the king as long as the king's obeying God. And it's sort of like Ephesians 6, children, obey your parents. But what if there's a bad parent who tells the kid to sell themselves into prostitution?
Well said.
Is the child supposed to obey that parent? No. The child obeys the parent as long as the parent's telling them to do something that lines up with God's word. You obey the government as long as the government's telling you to do something that lines up with God's word. Why would God tell you to do something in his word and then tell you to submit to a government that tells you not to do what he just got done telling you to do? And so Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from the Birmingham jail. One may well ask, how can you advocate breaking some laws and obeying others? The answer lies in the fact that there are two types of laws, just and unjust. One has not only a legal but a moral responsibility to obey just laws. Conversely, one has a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws. How does one determine whether a law is just or unjust? A just law is a man-made code that squares with the moral law or the law of God. Yeah. So you obey the government as long as the government's telling you to do something that lines up with God's word. So these Calvinist Puritans develop a way for people to rule themselves without a king. It's called a covenant form of government. And they got their idea from ancient Israel, the first 400 years out of Egypt before King Saul. And so it's where you get rights from God and you're fair to your neighbor because you're accountable to God, who's not a respecter of persons. You get blessings from God and you share them with your neighbor as charity because you're doing it as unto God. Mm-hmm. It's not socialism where the government takes away your stuff and gives it to supporters. No, this is your stuff, right? And so this covenant form of government is a way for people to rule themselves without a king. It's brilliant. You see, king is the norm. Gang leader is the norm. You get rid of the bad gang leader and you get another one and he's good for a while, but then he dies and the next one's bad. And you have a good king and his son's bad. I mean, here's David, the best of kings. His oldest son, Amnon, rapes his daughter Tamar, is murdered by his son Absalom, who tries to overthrow David. And another son, Adonijah, tries to usurp David's throne. And then you have good King Jehoshaphat. His son Jehoram is married to the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel. Athaliah is her name. And so Jehoram kills all of his brothers. Well, when he dies, Athaliah comes in and she kills all the royal seed. And it's like that was, and Jehoshaphat was good, but Hezekiah was good. But his son Manasseh is wicked, 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 sacrificing kids to Moloch. And so that's the dilemma. You get rid of the bad king and you put in a good one. And everything's fine until his son takes over and he's a terrible
Excellent point.
king. And so the brilliance of a covenant form of government is you get rid of the bad king and you maintain order in society without the rubber band snapping back with another king. And it works because everybody, every person is acutely aware that they're accountable to God, who wants them to be fair and is going to hold them accountable. So where did the Puritans get this idea of a covenant form of government? The Bible. But what part of the Bible? The first 400 years out of Egypt before King Saul is called the Hebrew Republic. And so around 1400 BC, the Israelites come into the Promised Land. And for 400 years, there's no king. It's called the Hebrew Republic. And it's literally the first instance in world history where you have millions of people and no king. And again, it works because everybody's taught the law. God's watching, wants you to be fair, going to hold you accountable, and you have a conscience. And it worked until the priest stopped teaching the law. You say, what? Yeah, Eli, the high priest, his own sons are sleeping with women in the very tent where the Ark of the Covenant is. He's not following the law. And then you have another Levite with a graven image in the house of a guy named Micah. And the tribe of Dan comes along and steals the graven image. And they tell this Levite, come along with us. You can be a priest to our whole tribe. And you're reading the story, scratching your head, saying, what's this Levite doing with a graven image? Isn't that one of the commandments? You're not supposed to have them?
That's right.
And then there's a Levite with a concubine. The law says the Levite's to marry a virgin of his own tribe. Here he is with the woman he's not even married to. He's not following the law. And the poor concubine's raped to death by the sodomites, something about that sodomite behavior that appears at the last stages of a people ruling themselves as casting off of restraint. And by the time you're grossed out with the story, you read this line, every man did that which was right in their own eyes. Why? Because the priest stopped teaching them what was right in the Lord's eyes. Turns into this chaos, and they all go to Samuel the prophet, and they say the self-government system's not working. We want to be like the other countries. We want a king. And Samuel cries, and the Lord tells him, they have not rejected thee, but they have rejected me. So God's original plan that first 400 years was to not have a king, everybody be taught the law, and then they sinned in asking for a king. And one story, Saul is pouting that his son Jonathan became friends with David.
Right.
And he turns to his soldiers and he says, none of you soldiers care. And one soldier, Doeg the Edomite, says, King, I care. I saw David go to this town. The priest gave him some bread. And Saul says, bring the priest to me. They show up. He turns to his soldiers and says, kill him. And the soldiers hesitate. And Doeg the Edomite goes out there and kills them all. What just happened? The soldiers had been operating under the old system where everybody's accountable to God to follow the law. And the law says you need 2 or more witnesses before you condemn somebody to death. There's only one witness, Doeg. And so the soldiers are hesitating. They have a conscience. And Doeg says, King, I'm going to surrender my conscience to the government, to you. You tell me to kill, I'll kill. Tell me to kill the baby in the womb, I'll kill it. Tell me there's no more male and female. When you blow your trumpet, I'll bow to your statue, right? And so King Saul is the divider between England and America. The kings of England look to the Bible for their authority, but they look to the King Saul and on part of the Bible, the divine right of kings. Obey me out of fear. Whereas the Calvinist Puritans and Baptists and Presbyterians and Quakers that founded the colonies in America, they look to the pre-King Saul part of the Bible, right? Pre-King Saul, America, the post-King Saul is what was going on in England. And it's a difference between a dead pyramid ruled top down through fear and a living tree where everybody's involved, right? That difference in church government from a hierarchical, the clergy laity model where you are a spectator and you watch the clergy do the ministry, to the congregational model where the pastor teaches the saints to do the work of the ministry. And so this is the 1600s, and I'm going to skip past some stuff for the sake of time. And so you have this covenant form of government that's being established in New England, and pastors in their churches are founding cities.
And this all is in your book. The stuff you're skipping over is all in this book that you've outlined. Because I remember you mentioning Thomas Hooker's great message that he sort of outlined some of these correct, and he established this government on which our Constitution bill is actually modeled after.
Right. So here's a plaque in New England. It says Thomas Hooker's congregation established the form of government upon which the present Constitution of the United States is modeled. So you have the Constitution modeled on these New England congregations where everybody's involved, modeled on the Reformation, the Bible, what part of the Bible, that first 400 years out of Egypt before King Saul. So it's called the Hebrew Republic. And so in New England, instead of separation of church and state, it was the pastors and churches that created the state. And so they had one building in town called the Meeting House, and that's where the pastor would teach the Bible, and that's where they would do their city business. The word synagogue means meeting house. That's where the rabbi would teach the law, and that's where they would do their city business. And so when the revolution starts, the British send over a military governor, Thomas Gage, and he outlaws meeting houses. And he says, you just obey government mandates. And we're like, no, nothing happens in America unless we give our consent. And he's like, no, you obey government mandates. And we're like, no, nothing happens unless we give our consent. It turns into a revolutionary war, and we win. And we set up a government where it's we, the people, government from the consent of the governed. So why is this important? Romans 13 is understood differently in a monarchy versus a republic. In a monarchy, subjects submit to the king. In a republic, the citizens are the king.
Absolutely.
Right? So all those pastors say, oh, you just got to submit to the government, do whatever the government says. They need to pick up and go to China and submit to Xi Jinping. Or when the government blows the trumpets, they just bow and surrender. In America, though, we're the pre-King Saul is role model. We're where the people are the king. And so that's the 1600s, the Calvinist Puritans. After a century, it got a little dry. And some said, well, God has his plan of government, but he also is so smart that he has planned out who's going to wind up in heaven. So don't even bother preaching the gospel. Whoever's going to get saved, they'll get saved. And they became unevangelistic. And so in the 1700s, you had the New Lights, the Pietists, that says, look, it's more than a plan. You have to have a personal experience with Jesus. And when you do, your life will change and you won't do worldly things, like go to bars and brothels and get involved in government. It's like, wait, what was that last thing? Yeah, government, it's worldly. If you're really a Christian, you're going to withdraw from worldly things like government. So withdrawal. Where the Puritans are like, no, 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 everybody get involved. This is our opportunity to rule ourselves without a king. Participation. And so these two ideologies sort of confronted. I get through where the Pietists came from, and it turned into a concept of the two kingdoms, the kingdom of the government, the kingdom of the church, the two don't touch. And so where the Puritans said you can do two things, you can be a spouse and you can be a parent, right? They're different roles, but one person can do both. You can be involved in church stuff and you can be involved in state stuff. The Pietists are like, no, you have to withdraw from the state. It's worldly. You just be involved in church stuff. It's like, okay, well, I have a question. If all the spiritual people withdraw from being involved in government because they're holy, who's left to be involved in government but the unholy?
That's a great question.
And they're going to yield to their ambitions and become power hungry and dictators. In 4 centuries of that teaching in Germany allowed Hitler to put Jews on train cars, and they're going right past the church crying for help. And the church's response was, well, that's the government that's killing Jews, and we can't get involved because we're holy. And so let's just sing praise songs to Jesus louder. It's like, can anybody see there's something wrong with that picture? Anyway, so I go through the Pietists. They did spread the revival, but the byproduct was don't get involved. And so the question I have to those that think they're being holy by not being involved, what do you do with Numbers chapter 30? It's the silence equals consent chapter of the Bible. A half a dozen scenarios. One, If a daughter binds herself with a vow while living in her father's house in her youth, and her father hears her vow and holds his peace, then all her vows shall stand. But if her father overrules her on the day he hears, then none of her vows shall stand, and the Lord will release her. That's come down to us as vows in a wedding ceremony. And the pastor tells the church members, if you are silent when you hear these vows, you're given your consent. Speak now or forever hold your peace. And so it's called the rule of tacit admission. And it's in debt collection law. Somebody owes you money, you wait 10 years to try to start collecting. The judge will say you're past the statute of limitations.
That's right.
If you really thought they owed you money, you would not have been silent so long. It's in trademark law. You design a trademark, somebody flat out copies it, and you know about it, and you don't try to defend your copyright, they get to use it. It's in real estate law. You save up money, buy a rent house, and some squatter moves in, and if you're not trying to evict him or charge him rent, they can gain title to your property through adverse possession just by you being silent. It's in Constitution, Article 1, Section 7. Congress passes a bill, puts it on the president's desk. If any bill shall not be returned by the president within 10 days, the same shall be a law in like manner as if he had signed it. All he has to do is let it sit there and be silent, and his silence equals his signature.
Wow.
And so if a church member's silence gives consent to wedding vows, it gives consent to other things. And if they're killing babies in the community and the church members are silent, they're giving consent to killing babies.
Amen.
You're an accessory, and you'll share in the judgment. Leviticus 20, any Israelite who sacrifices any of his children to Molech to be put to death, if members of the community close their eyes. When that man sacrifices one of his children to Molech, I myself will set my face against him and his family and cut them off from their people. All you got to do is close your eyes when they kill the kid and you're cut off. California had a bill to kill babies 28 days after birth last year. And enough people, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, went to Sacramento and said, stop, and they made him change it. Apostle Paul, Acts 22, is talking to the Lord, and when the blood of thy martyr Stephen was shed, I also was standing by consenting to his death. Paul didn't say a word. He didn't throw a stone, but he knew he was guilty for the death of Stephen just by standing there silent. Proverbs 24, rescue those who are unjustly sentenced to death. Don't stand back and let them die. Don't try to disclaim responsibility by saying you didn't know about it. For God, who knows all hearts, knows yours, knows you knew. He will repay everyone according to his deeds. Mordecai tells Esther there's a mandate from the government to kill the Jews. If you remain silent this time, deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. Numbers 20. Moses and Aaron are called to the door of the tabernacle. Lord spake to Moses, take the rod, gather the assembly, thou and Aaron, speak to the rock, and it shall give forth water. While they gathered the assembly, Moses lifts up his hand, and with his rod he smote the rock twice. Water came out. End of the chapter. Lord spake to Moses, Aaron will not enter the land because both of you rebelled against my command at the waters of Meribah. It's like both. Aaron didn't do anything. He didn't say anything. Yeah, that's just it. He heard God say, speak to the rock.
That's right.
When Moses lifted up the rod the first time, it probably took Aaron by surprise. When Moses lifted up the rod the second time and hit the rock, Aaron knew what was coming and he did not protest. He didn't say, well, Moses, hold it. He was silent. And in that instant, he was guilty. Moses's was a sin of commission. Aaron's was a sin of omission. Leviticus 5, a person sins because he did not speak up, even though he was an eyewitness to a case or knew what happened. Anyone who failed to testify is guilty. Martin Luther King, he who accepts evil without protesting it is really cooperating with it. We all know this verse, Leviticus 19:18, love your neighbor as yourself. Do you know the verse right before it? Confront your neighbor directly so you'll not be held guilty for their sin. They're loving each other, and they're confronting each other. One translation says, rebuke your neighbor directly and you'll not incur guilt because of him. Proverbs 9, rebuke a wise man, he'll love thee. Ecclesiastes 7, better to hear the rebuke of the wise than the song of fools. Luke 17, if your brother sin, rebuke him. 2 Timothy 4, preach the word, be instant in season, out of season, reprove, rebuke. Now you can do it nicely. 1 Timothy 5:1, rebuke not an elder, but entreat him as a father. What does entreat mean? Doesn't mean being silent. It means you're petitioning respectfully. So they have a woke tactic, and the tactic is to guilt trip Christians into being more Christian than Christ. You say, what? So yeah, if you're really Christian, you will be silent and give your tacit approval to us teaching something to children that Jesus would never teach. I mean, would Jesus teach the trans agenda?
No.
We know what Jesus taught. Matthew 19, he who made them at the beginning made them male and female. So they're saying, if you're really Christian, you'll let us teach something Jesus would never teach. So if you're really Christian, you won't act like Christ. I mean, think of it. Here are school counselors who cannot even define what a woman is. If they think they're able to tell that a boy's supposed to be a girl, it's like, it's illogical. And so Jesus warned, if you cause one of these little ones who trust me to fall into sin, it will be better for you to be thrown into the sea with a large millstone around your neck. So I think it's going to be a rude awakening for all those church members who think they're being spiritual and holy by not being involved. Oh, we don't get involved in politics. We just preach the gospel. We're holier than you are because we don't care about what kind of country we're leaving our kids.
Come on, there.
I think it's going to be a rude awakening when they realize by their silence, they're giving consent to all the evil. They're inviting the judgment of God on their heads. So a scriptural case can be made that God cares about children. So the answer is local, local, local. More people go to church in an area than vote in a school board race. All you got to do is say, look, we don't agree with every church on every doctrine, but none of us are happy with what's being taught. Let's just vote some mama bear in there and pack out the school board meeting early. You know, you don't have to be a member. You don't have to have a kid going to the public school to be on the school board. You can actually be a homeschooler and be on the school board. I know some people. So the answer is, if every church will take responsibility for the little kids in the neighborhood around the church that Jesus loves, then we can begin to turn this thing around and vote in people. And then an observation, as more power concentrates into fewer hands globally, God's counterbalances to get more people involved locally.
I love that.
See these globalists, Klaus Schwab, George Soros, we see them getting more power. God's response is to get more people involved locally. And anyway, there's more in the book there, but I'm gonna, I got to run. But one thought is, some people say we're not going to do anything. We're just waiting for Jesus to come back. So I have a question. Who do you think you're going to meet when you're raptured?
You're going to meet the Son of
Jesus?
God.
Does Jesus love the little children? Yeah.
Yes.
Do you think he might wonder why you didn't do anything to protect them? I mean, we're not in North Korea or China. We're in America where the citizen is the king. The politicians are your servants. You hire them, you fire them, you vote them in, you vote them out. And even if we can't turn around, shouldn't we at least try?
Absolutely.
And anyway.
Well,
so
go ahead.
I better run here, but I just appreciate you having me on. And all this information is in the book, Silence Equals Consent, The Sin of Omission. And my website is AmericanMinute.com.
I want to ask you, I know we got about 3 minutes max. I do want to ask you a quick question about this upcoming election. Is this silence, when you were with Barna, and you mentioned, I think I'm going to circle back to what you said at the beginning. It's got to be troubling to you, and it is me, that when you said that most people that don't vote are in communities that are mainly Christian, is it fair to say that we have the country this afternoon, that the Christian community we have ourselves to blame for the nation that we have by our silence and our sin of omission? Is that a fair statement as we close today?
Yeah. I mean, I was in Colorado and there was a bill to have minimum punishment for those caught buying and selling children for sex. Every Democrat voted against it. A minimum punishment. They voted against it. Where's the church? Oh, we're so spiritual. They're selling children. Oh yeah, we don't care about children. We just want to sing praise songs. It's like they're carting Jews off to be killed. Oh, we're just going to sing praise songs. It's like, Peter was with a group around a fire. We're social creatures. We want to be accepted. We don't want to be rejected. He's with a group and a girl gets in his face and says, "You were with Jesus." And he looks around and everybody's eyeing him. He's about to get kicked out of the group. And he says, "I never met the guy." Like, that's it, Peter? Right. You caved that fast? It is a real fear to be kicked out of a group. But after the resurrection, the Sanhedrin said, "We gave you strict orders not to teach in his name." And Peter said, "We must obey God rather than men." What happened to Peter? Now he doesn't care about being kicked out of a synagogue. What happened to him? He was filled with the Holy Spirit. Maybe one of the evidences of being filled with the Holy Spirit is having the boldness to speak out against corruption. I can't be silent anymore. I have to speak out. I have to share the gospel with people, but I also have to speak out against injustice. I got to speak out to defend the little innocent children. And I think we're the bride of Christ, and God's pushing the world to this decision-making moment.
I'm with you, buddy. Listen, I know you're busy, man, and we thank you for this time. And I'm going to tell them about the book, how to get it, but AmericanMinute.com, how to get it. And I encourage folks to get it. And I'm going to have you back on soon. I know it's good to have you again. And I appreciate every time you come on the network, Bill. You're a dear friend. And I hope you have a great 4th of July. And we'll see you down the road, hopefully in August sometime as we get through July, and have you back on in a month or so. And talk more about the country. We appreciate you being with me today. Folks, we'll be right back. I want to thank Bill Federer tonight. What a tremendous interview. I could sit there and listen to it again. I encourage you to go back and re-listen to this. Folks, look, he just laid it out, what I just said at the beginning, and it's just the Holy Spirit's timing is always the best. Perfect. This probably interview would not have had as much teeth and as much meat on it if we'd have ran it a month ago. But it has a lot of umph tonight because of what's going on in the nation. And I want to say it again, folks. I'm going to quote my friend Ricky Wilson, something the Lord showed her. If you sit at home in November and you allow these baby killers to take over this government because of your apathy and your self-righteous bigotry, every baby that is slaughtered in an abortion meal and an abortion clinic, Ricky said the Lord showed her that those that stayed silent in the face of this, the blood of those babies was coming up literally from the veins of their own hands. Every illegal alien that comes into this country and kills somebody because you want to sit on your blessed assurance and be righteous and holy and don't vote because we're voting for evil if we vote. Well, no, what you're doing is by your silence, you are consenting to the killing of innocent Americans. You're consenting to the murder and the rape and the assault, the murder and the rape and the assault of citizens in this nation by those that shouldn't be here. We're not here worshiping a man. We're not here worshiping a party. We're not here extolling one over the other. But folks, somewhere in this journey, I feel sometimes like screaming. I just want to say, can common sense kick in to our brains? Can common sense just kick in to the American public? And I'm not talking about the left tonight. I'm talking to the right. I'm talking to Christians. I'm talking to people that should know better. And people that supposedly are all in tune with God and all in tune with the Holy Spirit and all in tune with this thing that they call faith. And yet they come up with these asinine, brainless ideas that to vote is evil and to support President Trump is evil. Well, who are you going to support? You're going to support the other side again that believes, and Bill mentioned the bill in California, folks. Do you realize that the people in California, they don't care about killing a baby outside the womb? Do you remember the governor of Virginia, Northam? He's out now. You remember the day that he sat on that radio station and he told people, he said, well, if we kill a baby after 9 months, we'll just let the baby sit on the counter and we'll break his neck and give him comfort and then we'll kill it. Folks, that's the most chilling thing I've ever heard. But what was more chilling about it is that there were people that voted for Ralph Northam in Virginia to put him in office. And I'm going to tell you something. Every election this country has ever had, evil would not take root if there wasn't Christians behind voting for it. You take that to the bank. You can take that to the bank. I want to say that again. There ain't been an election in the history of this country where evil men took over the government. And I love what Bill Federer said. He said, why do Christians not vote and then allow non-Christians and evil, I'm telling you, as evil people as you can get to rule over us in tyranny? Because if they do, folks, they're coming for you and for me. You understand that? I'm being very calm tonight. I don't want to be, but I'm being very calm tonight. But I pray this message has sunk in deep. are silence, and I saw Jason Miller out there, and he's absolutely right. Silence and license, which means consent, have the same letters. We are given license to evil when we stay silent. When we don't get involved in our government, when we don't stand up to corrupt government, when we don't stand up to those that are trying to kill babies and to push a transdominionism ideology on the nation and lawlessness and God knows what else is behind this, we are given consent to it. We are given consent. Anyway. Did you enjoy that tonight? Put some fire in that house if you did. That was great, Cedric. I'm going to give you a my goodness. I'm going to give a my goodness too. AmericanMinute.com is the website. I could keep going tonight, but I am just going to be honest with you folks. I'm a little worn down. I've been going all week, and I've got some gum issues tonight, and I'm gonna rest up because I want you to be back with me tomorrow night. We're going to talk about this interview. We're going to give you a chance to chime in. McFilesForum@gmail.com if you got a question or comment. And we'll have a news show, wrap-up show, and then we'll take your questions. No guests tomorrow night. We may get old James Akers to call in if something happens. Big news today is they're trying to erase Kamala Harris's liberal history, her liberal covering, or whatever you want to call it. It's a joke. It's amazing. There's like 50 videos out there or more of the mainstream media calling her Joe Biden's border czar, and Jean-Pierre today literally said she was never the border czar, and we've never called her that. Almost 50 videos. Peter Ducey, if you're listening to me tonight, kid, let me give you a McFile salute. He literally had a piece of paper with him, and we're going to play the video tomorrow night, of the Dems talking points in the last 48 hours about Kamala Harris. And he handed it to Jean-Pierre. He literally held it up and he said, "Why are you repeating this?" And he was talking about how it's circulating throughout the media. I've got no bones whatsoever and not a pulse in my conscience to speak out against this evil that we are facing in November. And I am proud to support President Donald John Trump. I am proud to tell you to go vote for him. I'm proud to tell you to pray for him. I'm proud to tell you that if we don't elect President Trump, this country probably won't be in existence a year after this next election, folks. I'm not proud of that. I'm scared to tell you that, but that's just the truth. But I'm going to say it again as a close. Our silence and our apathy and our arrogance is going to be the death of this country. And I'm talking to Christians tonight. I'm talking to you self-righteous bigots that sit back in your little self-righteous, pious, puffed-up attitudes, and you think that you know everything and you're a know-it-all. You know nothing. Because every baby, every murder, everything that is allowed by these tyrannical leaders and allowed to overflow this country, if you do not stand up against it, it's going to be held to your account. Now look, we're standing up against it. We may ultimately go down in flames, but I tell you what, when I get to the end of my life and my grandkids are around me, I don't want them looking at their Grandpa Mac and saying, "Papa, you had a show for 7 years, 8 years, 9 years, 10 years, 15 years, and you never said nothing about the evil that was on the country. Why did you not say something?" I want them to say, "Grandpa Mac, we heard some awful things about you and the way you screamed every night." we heard that you just busted trash cans and screamed and broke glass on your show and wore weird hats and wore bear hats, but you fought. You fought for your country, and you fought for us, Papa Mac. That's what I want to hear him tell me. I'm not going to go down silent. And I'm encouraging you not to go down silent tonight. We may go down, folks, but we don't need to go down quietly. I love you tonight. Have a good night. I'll see you back in the morning on the McFiles Faith Network for the Bible study. If you enjoyed Bill Federer, put some fire in the house. Go to Amazon or his website, AmericanMinute.com. It's a great, I've already ordered my copy, and I'm thinking about getting a box of them to give away to folks who come to our conferences. And Silence Equals Consent. Excellent, excellent book. Great presentation tonight. I'm with you, Joanne Griffin. I could listen to Bill Federer all day, all week. Put some fire in that house. Have a great night, everybody. I'll see you back here in the morning and then tomorrow night on the News Network. God bless you guys. Have a great night from the McFiles. Fight, folks. Fight, 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 fight. As President Trump told us the day he was almost assassinated. Be blessed.